Hey there, and welcome to Brada Tales. Tonight, we bring you a chilling collection of horror stories set against the soothing sound of rain. Before we dive into suspense, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. If these stories send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get comfortable, let the fear slowly take over, and tell us if you enjoy this kind of storytelling. Now sit back and relax, we're about to begin. I'm part of a Marine Special Operations unit nicknamed Phantom, and have been for almost a decade. During my service, I've deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, parts of Syria, and numerous countries across Africa. I've seen all four corners of the world and witnessed my fair share of the good, the bad, and the downright horrific that comes with being part of special operations. I've accumulated countless stories, some more interesting than others, but nearly all are buried under layers of classification that won't see the light of day until long after I'm gone. But something happened a few nights ago that stands apart from everything else. Unlike our usual operations in distant war zones, this one unfolded in our own backyard. The enemies weren't foreign insurgents or proxy fighters, they weren't even human. The details from that night remain deeply disturbing, and command isn't exactly forthcoming with answers. That's why I'm bypassing protocols, disregarding directives, and putting my career on the line. Even with names changed and locations altered, innocent people have died. Upper command would rather bury the truth than acknowledge these deaths and provide closure to their families. I don't have all the answers about what happened in that remote Oregon wilderness preserve, but I have enough to reveal at least a version of the truth. For security and privacy, I'm withholding personal information such as real names, exact locations, and unit specifics. I've obscured enough details that I doubt even the most resourceful three-letter agencies could trace this back. I hope they don't try. As I mentioned, I'm part of Phantom, a Marine Special Operations unit. If you know about Special Operations Forces, you'll understand what that means. My team is nicknamed Spectre, part of our unit's naming convention using ghost-themed call signs like Wraith, Phantom, Poltergeist, Shade, etc. We're a 12-person element led by Major David North, an old-school combat veteran with Lieutenant Alex Stone as his second. We have Sergeant Rivera handling communications, me as the team medic, and 7 other operators with various specialties. Major North decided we deserved some downtime after our last mission. We'd all made it back in one piece, which isn't always guaranteed in our line of work. Our weekend was supposed to be quiet as we rotated onto Quick Reaction Force, QRF, duty for the month. QRF means if anybody anywhere needs America's Shadow Warriors, we kit up and deploy immediately. As luck would have it, just as a few of us were about to head off base for our 2 authorized beers of the month, QRF restrictions, the alarm sounded. We raced back to our command post and geared up. North arrived with unexpected news. We'd likely be back in time for those beers because we were heading to northern Oregon, of all places. We had no information about the situation. Command hadn't provided intel on opposing forces, weapons, or area layout. But being on QRF, Spectre still prepared and reached the helicopter landing zone in under 20 minutes. While waiting for our transport, North finally received some briefing. Apparently, a facility in an isolated section of a wildlife preserve in northern Oregon had activated a distress signal. The area had a lengthy history of disappearances and frequently closed trails and campgrounds. This raised obvious questions. What was this facility? Why was it hidden in a wildlife preserve? Why deploy an elite special operations team for what seemed like a domestic incident? Why were we going when international hotspots might need us at any moment? North acknowledged these concerns but claimed that was all he knew. He'd been with our team through countless deployments and had always been straight with us, which is how we knew he was holding back. Our transport arrived, the legendary 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, or Night Stalkers. We expected a single Black Hawk, but the armed escort of 2 additional helicopters caught everyone's attention. We were in domestic America, heading to Oregon. Why the heavy security? Even with the Night Stalkers' impressive speed, it took hours to cross several states. The inside of the helicopter at full throttle was deafening despite our electronic headsets. Sitting next to North, I noticed him speaking on a separate frequency, unusual since he typically communicated through Rivera, our comms specialist. He had a side channel open, talking to someone and writing down information. I managed to glimpse Neptune, close quarters, hostile unknown, no friendlies on sight. We touched down in an empty parking area outside a ranger station. As we exited, North radioed the helicopters. Spectre actual to Nightwing, maintain orbit for potential close air support, over. He broke transmission and addressed us directly, secure the perimeter. I'm going to speak with the ranger and get a tactical brief. Just received new intel. We took defensive positions behind parked ranger vehicles. Our team was equipped with advanced night vision optics providing almost daylight visibility in darkness, along with infrared lasers mounted on our rifles. In the military, we own the night. The tree line ahead looked like a ghostly light show, with our nods down as North returned with a ranger trailing behind. All Spectres, this is actual, his voice came through our comms. New information indicates the facility has suffered a mass casualty situation. Hostiles are unidentified, but outgoing communications during the distress call suggest extremely dangerous entities engaging at close range. No friendly forces remain on site. I repeat, no friendlies on site. Shoot any armed contacts on site. A few seconds passed as North turned to the park ranger. Any additional information, Ranger Holloway? The man, probably in his late 40s with thinning hair, nervously adjusted his collar before responding. I heard a lot of gunfire down there earlier. And whatever you do, stick together. In these woods, never separate. Frost, our weapons specialist, laughed under his breath. Well, that's reassuring, North nodded to the ranger as he checked his weapon. Everyone watch your sectors. Let's move. We all had our pre-mission rituals, the same ones we performed before stepping off at forward operating bases overseas. I exhaled slowly. Frost slapped the side of his helmet to psych himself up, and North pulled out a worn silver pocket watch, checking it briefly before tucking it away. We moved down the pathway, following North in a staggered column. Our IR lasers swept across trees, rocks, and vegetation, searching for potential threats. Despite our vigilance, nothing appeared, but something definitely felt wrong. When moving through wilderness, you listen to the ambient sounds, crickets, birds, small animals scurrying away. Moving down that path, I couldn't hear anything. When wildlife goes silent, predators are nearby. It's common for some animals to flee when humans pass through, but crickets and distant birds typically maintain their calls. There was nothing, absolute silence. We're called silent professionals, but hearing my teammates breathing 15 meters ahead was unsettling. Something else was in these woods with us, something the forest feared more than armed humans. After marching for nearly 30 minutes, North signaled a halt. As the command rippled down to my position, we approached a metal chain-link fence. 4 operators and I established security, covering the tree line behind us while North, Stone, and Frost approached the gate. The trail continued a few meters beyond the fence before disappearing into trees. A dirt path branched off, forming a gravel road that led into a fenced area marked with no trespassing signs. Just beyond the gate stood a small guard shack. North tried to signal anyone inside by flashing his weapon light in a pattern. When he aimed the beam through the doorway, we saw blood splashed across the back wall and an arm protruding from the doorframe. North looked at Frost. "Get your kit," Frost nodded, slung his rifle, and removed his assault pack. Each operator carried specialized equipment, depending on mission requirements. Frost was our breacher, always prepared with tools to get through any barrier. As he positioned the bolt cutters around the lock, we heard it, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere yet nowhere specific. Maybe it was the forest's acoustics or something more unnatural. It sounded like a woman screaming in agony, yet distorted, as if merged with a dying marine animal, with a deep underlying bass tone beneath the higher pitches. It crawled under everyone's skin. Those on security immediately intensified their scanning, left, right, up, down. Even Rivera, a former linebacker built like a tank who once used his fingers to plug an arterial blade during a firefight, nervously checked his sectors. "What the hell was that?" Stone whispered. Frost shook his head as he scanned the distant tree line. "Some horror movie bullshit right here." I gripped my rifle tighter, my knuckles whitening beneath my gloves. Everyone was equally unsettled, everyone except North. "Cut the lock and press forward." "Tighten up your tactical awareness," he ordered calmly. The lock snapped open. North and I entered the guard shack, while two operators and Stone secured the gravel road ahead. The dead guard wore no name tape or company logo, just a black tactical vest that had been torn apart. A massive wound covered his chest, not from a bullet, but something that had punched through his sternum, shattering his ribcage from within. No exit wound, just catastrophic trauma that looked like he'd been impaled by something massive. My breath caught as I confirmed, "Clear, but you need to see this." North exited the shack, spitting into the gravel and shaking his head. Stone approached. "What did you find? Doesn't matter." "Form up and move forward," North replied curtly. We advanced down the gravel road in a wedge formation, North, Stone, and 3 operators in front, me and 2 others in back, Rivera in the middle with communications equipment. As we entered the facility's perimeter, Rivera contacted headquarters. "Spectre Base, this is Spectre Comms. We've reached the objective." This made me wonder if Rivera was calling our actual command, who was North communicating with on that private channel. The clearing revealed the facility, a gray concrete rectangle about the size of a small gas station. Floodlights mounted along the foundation illuminated the gravel lot, creating a stark contrast with the deep shadows of the surrounding forest. The mass casualty situation we'd been warned about was evident. Several guards, all mutilated similar to the gate guard, lay scattered across the gravel. Unlike the first victim, these guards wore heavy body armor and carried automatic weapons. Spent shell casings littered the ground everywhere. We cleared the exterior, each of us breathing heavily and muttering curses at the carnage. North called us back to stack up at the entrance. Inside, we found a lobby with destroyed furniture, bullet impacts marking walls and ceiling, and 2 more dead guards, one slumped against a blood-stained wall, another crumpled in a heap. Behind a desk sat a woman in civilian clothes, her entire torso region torn apart. Her empty eyes seemed to follow me as we passed toward the double doors behind her. Rivera paused, looking at the woman. "Sir, she was unarmed. I can see that," North replied tersely. "Keep chatter to a minimum." Beyond the double doors, we discovered a clinical hallway lined with white ceramic tiles, stained, like everything else, with blood, tissue, and brain matter from unfortunate guards. I counted 21 bodies so far. A flickering light shone through wire-reinforced windows in another set of double doors at the bottom of a staircase. North directed us to flow through both sides. Inside was a T-shaped hallway, the central corridor extending to a set of reinforced blast doors at the far end, with labs on either side protected by wire glass windows. Despite numerous bullet impacts and damage to the glass, the windows had held. "That can't be standard ballistic glass," Rivera observed. "Why wouldn't they take cover in the labs?" Frost asked. Stone examined the scene. "Looks like they were attacked from behind, or something came from inside," North added grimly. While the corridors were chaotic with blood, bodies, and spent ammunition, The labs contained dead technicians in white coats stained with their own blood. My stomach turned as the pieces fell into place. Whatever had killed these people had been indiscriminate in its slaughter. We formed a rolling T formation, moving down the hallway. I covered the right, Frost took center with his heavier weapon, and Stone watched left. North directed us from behind as the lab windows ended halfway down the corridor, with solid white doors near the blast doors at the far end. North positioned operators at the side doors while Frost aimed back down the hallway. The rest of us established security where needed. North examined the blast doors, checking for gaps but finding none. Blood had seeped from underneath, causing him to lift his boots and inspect it closer. Despite the blood flow, there were no visible openings. An electronic panel with a hand scanner was positioned on the right side. North switched to his private frequency again. About those doors, yeah, there's a hand scanner at the far end. He paused, listening. Got one right here. Wait, repeat last, alive. He rubbed his face in frustration. Damn, this place is a slaughterhouse. How am I supposed to? A crash erupted from the white lab door to the right of the blast doors, the one I was covering. Everyone froze momentarily as Stone aimed his laser at it. North turned his head. On me, prepare to breach. We stacked up, with North unusually taking point position. Stone felt the edges of the door, then tried the handle, locked. The attempt must have alerted whoever was inside because a voice called out, I'm in here. Please, I'll let you in, just don't shoot. Stone glanced at North, who nodded. Possible survivor inside. Stay sharp, wait for my command to fire. The electronic lock clicked open. Stone pulled the door as we entered the room. North left, me forward, two others following their respective sectors. Our lasers swept the room as a pair of hands emerged from behind a lab table. Please, the voice weakly called. North rushed over. Hands up now. Show me your hands or I swear I'll shoot. As the person stood, we saw a scientist, maybe mid-30s, with wavy brown hair and rectangular glasses. North closed the distance, shoving him against a metal cabinet. ID, where is it? Show it, North barked, roughly searching the lab tech. The scientist fumbled for his identification card. North grabbed it, shoving the man towards Stone. North returned to his private frequency, possible friendly, prepare for ID verification. He read off a series of alphanumeric codes before turning back to us. Get him up, North ordered. The scientist pleaded, please, I don't know what's happening. I was running fluid dynamics tests when we need to get out before it comes back. North got in the man's face. Shut up. I know what you've been doing. Open those blast doors now. The scientist appeared genuinely shocked as North continued. Open the goddamn doors now. Stone pushed the man forward to the blast doors. North grabbed him by the wrist, forcing his hand toward the scanner. The scientist struggled. Please, I don't have access. I injured my hand trying to hide. Let me go, I winced, uncharacteristically speaking up. Major, maybe we should, North turned, glaring daggers. Just wait until you see what's inside. I'm telling you, as the scientist wrestled against North's grip, Frost came from behind, pinning the man against the blast door, allowing North to force his hand onto the scanner. It illuminated with a bright blue light as several lines traced over his handprint before flashing green. The electronic locks disengaged, and the blast doors began to separate. North released the man. Well, look at that, the doors slowly opened, revealing a dark room with flashing red emergency lights. The sound of broken glass scraped against the floor as a stream of bluish liquid, mixed with blood, leaked into the hallway from several guards' bodies revealed in the opening. North grabbed the scientist by his collar, dragging him to his feet. You know these men, Doctor. Friends of yours, he shoved him through the doorway, causing the scientist to slip in the fluids and cut his hand on broken glass. We entered behind them, and I froze at the sight. In my career, I've witnessed mass graves that terrorist cells had used to dispose of entire villages. I've seen underground torture chambers in remote compounds. This surpassed all of that, every atrocity, every war crime, multiplied several times over. A series of cylindrical tanks lined the walls covered with monitors, hard drives, and computer systems. The trail of carnage led from the pile of guards at the doorway. I counted another 18 armed personnel, bringing the total to 39 security forces taken out by something. What truly disturbed me were the tubes themselves. Each was the size of a refrigerator, filled with murky green and blue liquid. Inside, tubes and wires connected too. North shoved the scientist into one of the glass cylinders. The crack of the man's nose against the surface echoed in the empty space as he grabbed his face in pain. Well, doctor, which one was it? Which goddamn tank, which one? How did North know about these? Who was on that frequency? The scientist spat blood from his broken nose as North, standing at 6'4" and muscular even among special operators, lifted him by his shirt collar. I don't, the scientist began. Two operators moved aside as North slammed him against the left wall, causing the monitors to beep and light up. You don't know, and yet your handprint opens a room you claim to have no access to, North roared, abandoning all stealth protocols. The scientist sobbed incoherently. North flipped up his night vision goggles, revealing intense eyes boring into the man's soul. How many people did you take from hiking trails? How many? What kind of experiments did you perform on those teenagers before you put them in tanks? Which one escaped, the teenagers? Experiment. Something in my mind stopped cold. I switched on my rifle's tactical light, illuminating the tubes more clearly. My stomach dropped as understanding dawned. There were people in those tubes. They were people, or had been. Wires and tubes now penetrated semi-transparent mutated flesh as the bodies floated in liquid. One person's skin had developed a shark-like texture up their left arm before merging with strange gill-like openings in their chest, the skull elongated and protruding from their skin. My breathing faltered as I backed away, glass crunching under my boots. Curses erupted from others in the room as we all began to comprehend what we were seeing. Another victim's mouth had been sealed at the lips, while rows of serrated teeth protruded from their cheeks. Their eyes were covered with a translucent membrane, defining empty sockets beneath. Stone illuminated another tank where tentacle-like appendages extended from the subject's back, the bone structure completely reorganized. Jesus Christ, he gagged, turning away. I had to force myself to look away, my mind reeling at the implications. These had better be dead, I whispered. They are, North confirmed coldly as the scientist nodded vigorously through his tears. Yes, they died during the modification process. The cellular rejection was too severe. North raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Because if you're lying, I'll make you terminate each one personally. The scientist nodded frantically. North shoved him toward the center of the room. I stared at the floor, trying to erase the horrific images burning into my memory. Where did it go, Doctor? North demanded, his voice still cold. The scientist continued sobbing. I don't know, where is it? North repeated. It escaped. It killed everyone. Cut through the guards, through my colleagues, my friends. This statement nearly caused North to explode. He balled his fist and drove the reinforced knuckle of his tactical glove into the scientist's stomach. The smaller man doubled over, falling to his knees, now nursing a broken nose, cut hand, and likely ruptured internal organs. Your friends. You mean the friends who abducted a 19-year-old college student and a 17-year-old hiker and turned them into these abominations? Those friends, North's voice dripped with contempt. The scientist could only sob in response. North turned away, hands on his hips, disgusted. He looked at Stone, who stared back through his night vision device, equally horrified. North turned back to the scientist. You have until the count of 10 to tell me where this thing went, or I start using implements from this lab on you. I saw what you did to these kids, sir, Stone began, but North cut him off. 1, 2, 3, North counted steadily. Some operators looked away, others shook their heads. After what we'd seen, there wasn't a man in the room who would have stopped him. It's in the woods, the scientist blurted. You heard it. That cry just minutes ago, North laughed bitterly. You hear that? It's in the woods. He pulled out his sidearm, checking that it was loaded. How convenient. As the scientist struggled to his feet, I kicked his leg out from under him, dropping him back to his knees. He looked at me, then at North. You can't do this. This is illegal. Before North could finish his count, we heard it again, that haunting, inhuman cry echoing down the facility's corridors and reverberating off the glass tanks. Except this time it didn't come from the distant forest, it came from the stairwell. Then the lights went out. Whether from physical damage to the facility or something else, the power failed completely. Hallway lights, emergency systems, even the tank monitoring equipment. The creature cried out again, and this time I swear I heard words. Help me. Everyone who had their night vision up flipped them down. We trained our lasers toward the dark hallway beyond the door. The slight trembling of every green beam told the same story. All the death, all the horrors in the tanks, everyone was on edge. North positioned himself alongside Stone and me. He glanced back at the scientist. You run, you die, the man swallowed hard, nodding miserably. No, North corrected in a low voice. You really don't understand, the creature cried out again. Help me. Something hard struck the tile floor, followed by wet sliding sounds as it approached through the darkness. Help me, it called again, closer now. Frost exhaled shakily, adjusting his grip on his weapon. More sounds of movement, then another cry, help me. It was perhaps 15 feet from the doorway now. Lord have mercy, North muttered. That's when we saw it. Its body stood at least 7 feet tall, with a humanoid torso attached to a lower half that resembled some nightmarish aquatic creature. 2 massive tentacle-like appendages, glistening with blood, stretched from where legs should be. Its head was smooth and elongated, large teeth visible in the darkness, and its eyes, God, its eyes glowed like phosphorescent deep-sea creatures. It could see us perfectly. We all froze, rifles trained on it, even the machine gun aimed directly at it. A room full of elite operators, the best trained warriors on the planet, and everyone hesitated for that critical moment. North was the first to fire, squeezing his trigger and sending 5.56 rounds into the monstrosity. Frost opened up with his heavier weapon, then Stone and 2 more operators joined in. The creature screamed, a sound between an agonized woman and a wounded marine mammal. It lunged forward, crashing through one of the specimen tanks. Glass and fluid exploded everywhere, forcing several of us to shield our faces. The deformed body from inside flopped to the floor at our feet, releasing a putrid smell that filled the air. Jesus, Stone spat, gagging as he kicked the corpse away. The creature screamed again as Frost tried to backpedal. It leapt through the air, using one tentacle to pin him to the ground by his shoulder. Frost thrashed, driving his elbow repeatedly into its torso, but the creature wasn't focused on him. It was watching the scientist. As the man attempted to flee, the creature propelled itself across the room, pinning him face first into the wet floor. That's when I noticed the 4 smaller human-like arms protruding from its upper body. Its main tentacle held the scientist down while these arms, some normal, others ending in bony protrusions, began tearing into the man's back. The scientist screamed as his lab coat was shredded and the creature dug into his spine. Some of us continued firing, but it barely reacted, focused entirely on its victim. North's voice became cold and steady. "We can't engage effectively here." Outside now, he was right. The creature excelled in close quarters, able to overpower armed personnel before they could respond effectively. With the power out and blast doors inoperable, our only option was retreat. We ran, nerves frayed, weapons hot from continuous fire. I nearly slipped on blood-slicked tiles as we rushed up the stairs, firing desperately behind us. The scientist's screams echoed throughout the hallway until they suddenly stopped. "It's done with him," Frost panted as we burst outside. The open air replaced the stench of death with the crisp pine scent of the forest. Several operators deployed emergency flares, casting the area in an eerie glow of blues, reds, and greens. North directed Frost to establish a firing position on a vehicle hood, with clear lines of sight to the facility entrance. He positioned different operators to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining distance from the creature's reach. "Rivera, get on the net and call in air support," North ordered as we took defensive positions. The screaming had stopped. An unnatural silence fell, broken only by our controlled breathing and the soft crackling of the flares. Then it emerged, bursting through the entrance with unnatural speed. In the combined illumination of flares, chem lights, and weapon-mounted lights, we finally saw it clearly. Its skin varied between translucent and opaque, revealing muscles and organs beneath. Bone-like plating formed a natural armor over vital areas, while the back appendages terminated in hook-like structures. Its face resembled a human skull stretched and modified, with all too human eyes staring out from an inhuman visage. Frost opened fire first, a barrage of rounds tearing through its armored plating. The creature recoiled momentarily, then hissed and charged forward. North sprinted from his position as the thing drove its tentacles into a vehicle roof, severely denting it. Stone quickly shielded the injured Frost as the creature peered down at them. North drew its attention, firing at the back of its elongated head. It roared vengefully, abandoning the wounded operator to pursue North, who retreated toward another vehicle. The creature impaled the hood with one tentacle and another just beside me. I circled behind it, firing controlled bursts into its back. It cried out, blood now flowing freely from its wounds, as the calcium-like plating cracked and fell away. It turned toward me and charged. I was knocked to the ground, its smaller arms reaching for my face. I used my rifle as a barrier, keeping its snapping jaws from my throat as it gnawed at the metal. Frost blasted a chunk of its skull away with his weapon, staggering it momentarily. North struck it with his rifle stock, then backpedaled while reloading. The creature roared viciously as it lunged at him, both tentacles raised high. Glass exploded from vehicle windows as North dropped to one knee, firing upward into its torso. He circled backward into the open, but the creature couldn't follow. Its massive tentacles were lodged deep inside the vehicle frame. North let his rifle hang from its sling as he reached for something in his tactical vest, an M67 fragmentation grenade. "Fall back. Everyone in the open, take cover." We all retreated behind whatever protection we could find. I slid behind a concrete barrier, helping Stone shield the wounded Frost. I heard the distinctive ping of the spoon releasing, followed by North's shout as he vaulted over a vehicle hood. Stone covered Rivera's head as they both went prone. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave reverberating through my chest, even from behind cover. Shrapnel tore through the air, embedding in concrete, metal, and the surrounding trees. We cautiously began to raise our heads when the vehicle's fuel tank ignited, creating a secondary explosion and engulfing the area in flames. North stood, aiming over the hood of our cover. We all joined him, weapons trained on the burning wreckage, waiting to see if our nightmare had ended. The vehicle was a blazing skeleton, flames consuming everything in their path, including the creature. Yet somehow it pulled its remaining tentacle from the fiery wreck and stumbled forward. Its skin bubbled, its muscles boiled, and with most of its protective plating destroyed, it gazed around with ruptured, melting eyes. "Help me," it gurgled. Gravel crunched as its charred body collapsed forward. North emerged from cover, approaching cautiously. He lifted his night vision, drew his sidearm, and methodically fired 3 rounds into what remained of its head. A circle of light from above illuminated the scene as the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approached. I shielded my face and raised my goggles to avoid being blinded by the spotlight. "Hostile eliminated, facility secure," North reported calmly into his radio. The aftermath seemed shrouded in mystery. North positioned us contrary to standard procedures. Instead of ordering us prone while securing the landing zone, he placed Frost at the gate and told the rest of us to watch the tree line. When the vehicles arrived, that's when things got stranger. They weren't standard military transport, they were armored SUVs. For classification reasons, I can't share much about the team that arrived, but they weren't regular military. They wore black tactical uniforms with no identifying markers or insignia. Their hazmat suits and equipment looked more advanced than anything in our military inventory. They weren't hostile, one even offered us cigarettes. The helicopter landed on the opposite side of the facility, and we loaded Frost onto a stretcher for medical evacuation. As we prepared to depart, North finished conversing with a man in a tailored suit, short, maybe 5'8", with slick-back hair and a visible bulge under his jacket indicating a concealed weapon. North eventually joined us on the helicopter. Once airborne, he removed his helmet despite the crew's protests and slumped into his seat. When we returned to base, Team Wraith replaced us on QRF duty. I've spent days thinking about what happened, about what those people did in that lab. North said they kidnapped innocent people, experimented on them, changed them, but for what purpose? What kind of twisted research were they conducting? Who owned the facility? There were no U.S. government markings, no logos, nothing to identify them. There's still much I don't know, but what I do know is that those researchers got exactly what they deserved. That thing crying out for help, pleading for us to end its suffering, the more I think about it, the more it sickens me. I don't know who those men in black were that relieved us, but I heard some of them speaking Norwegian or Swedish. Whoever they are, I hope they learned from this catastrophe and never again meddle with forces they can't control. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, even in the name of science. Whatever they created wasn't just a monster, it was once human, and in its final moments, it remembered enough to ask for the only thing it truly needed: mercy. The Shadow Network is one of the most fascinating digital realms on Earth. Not because it brings joy or happiness, but because it offers a completely uncensored window into humanity. You can speak your mind, buy what you want, and do virtually anything when connected to the Shadow Network. It's a place of complete and total digital freedom. I've always been captivated by the concept of the Shadow Network. When the events in this story took place, I was working as a junior programmer at a tech startup in Seattle. Many people at our company had been accessing the Shadow Network recently. It had become almost like a trend. With so many colleagues using it regularly, it seemed perfectly safe for me to give it a try. I'd heard plenty of Shadow Network horror stories, tales of hacking, disturbing content, and even instances of users somehow having their addresses discovered. These stories were mainly what kept me away, but with most of my coworkers using it daily, I decided to take the plunge. I asked Mikey, our cybersecurity specialist, to come to my apartment and help me set it up. When Mikey arrived, we opened my laptop and began the installation process. He explained they were using a specialized program that allows access to the Shadow Network. He also asked if I was planning to do anything illegal, to which I replied no. He said since I wasn't, we didn't need to install Phantom. and additional security software necessary for those engaging in questionable activities. A little while later, everything was configured. I had my new encrypted IP address, and Mikey gave me a quick overview of what to do and what to avoid. He emphasized that when using the index, the shadow network's equivalent of a directory, I should keep it in filtered mode to reduce the chances of encountering disturbing content. After about 2 weeks of exploring the shadow network, I felt like a veteran user. I had visited various sites, conversed with some interesting people, made online acquaintances, and even purchased some premium coffee beans from a specialty shop that only existed on the shadow network. I had grown confident, perhaps too confident, and was ready to venture deeper into the darker corners of this hidden digital realm. I switched off the filtered mode on the index and began exploring the links. It took some time, primarily because the connection was sluggish, and many links led to defunct pages. Eventually, I stumbled upon a site called Reality Unfiltered. It was essentially a large chat room with various discussion threads. I'd always had a strong stomach and had seen violent movies and disturbing content through regular internet channels, so I wasn't particularly concerned. After browsing a few different chat threads, I began to realize how truly disturbing this site was. The people participating in these discussions weren't just talking. They were actual criminals bragging about their deeds. In these chat rooms, users could also share images. One person with the username Spectre was dominating one of the threads. He was describing in horrifying detail how he had broken into someone's house, abducted a teenage boy, and brutally murdered his parents by hiding under their bed and slitting their throats while they slept. He then explained how he brought the boy to a remote location where he was planning something terrible. I didn't believe he was telling the truth initially, but then he posted pictures. These were the most horrifying images I'd ever seen, close-ups of a terrified 15-16-year-old boy, tied up, bruised, and bleeding. Spectre kept posting more pictures, new ones showing the boy restrained to a chair, crying, terrified beyond comprehension. Then he shared an image of himself wearing a featureless white mask while preparing various tools on a table next to the bound victim. The most disturbing part was his posture, relaxed, methodical, as if preparing for routine work rather than an atrocity. He was looking directly at the camera with what could only be described as anticipation. I'd seen enough. I typed in the chat window, "You people are sick and deserve to rot in prison." "How do you sleep at night?" Immediately, users began mocking me, saying I was just as helpless and naive as the boy in the pictures, and that I should leave the adult section of the internet. They called me pathetic and weak. Then Spectre typed something in the chat, "Where exactly do you live, friend? I'm sure everyone would love to see you featured on this site next." I then made the biggest mistake of my life and wrote, "I'm contacting the FBI and having this entire site shut down." Less than a minute later, everything on the site went black, and a new chat box appeared with green text. Someone named Puppet Master typed, "Call the authorities and you will deeply regret it." I didn't respond and reached for my phone. What happened next continues to haunt me. My phone indicated I had a new message. I opened it to find, "Contact the police and you're dead." There was no number, not even unknown, just a blank field where the sender should be. I looked back at my laptop and saw the webcam indicator light illuminate. I could have covered it, but on the screen appeared a picture of me looking at my phone. My eyes widened in shock and I froze momentarily. Puppet Master typed again, "Put the phone down now and uncover your webcam." I set my phone aside but kept the webcam covered. He then wrote, "Have it your way." Immediately after, he posted my full name, age, and home address in the chat box and added, "It would be unfortunate if something happened to you and your tech startup colleagues, wouldn't it?" I complied and uncovered my webcam. He instructed me on how to make it impossible for me to access the site again. I followed each directive meticulously. When I finished, I received another text message. "Now don't ever try to return." Like before, it came from a blank number. I still reported it to the police using my colleague's phone, but they were never able to locate the site. If you ever explore the Shadow Network, never wander aimlessly, especially without additional security software. I was a foolish young programmer, and I hope nobody repeats my mistakes. I relocated to a different apartment and changed all my personal information, but the nightmares persist to this day. This next part happened just a few days after my initial encounter with the Shadow Network. I was still deeply shaken by what had occurred. The police attempted to track down the website, but since there was no way to recover my browsing history, and I had discovered the site by clicking random links, locating it seemed hopeless. Law enforcement advised me to change all my personal information and temporarily stay with someone I trusted. After updating virtually all my information, I decided to move in with my colleague Mikey. He was an incredibly dedicated, hardworking person who rarely partied or slacked off. He was fully committed to advancing his career in cybersecurity. In fact, he was one of the few people at our company who wasn't regularly accessing the Shadow Network. I told him everything about my experience, which is primarily why he agreed to let me stay with him. One night, we were both working late on a security project when my phone notified me of a new message. I checked to see who had texted me and saw that the sender had no number, just like before. The message simply read, "Check your computer." I opened my laptop and immediately noticed I had no control over the cursor. I tried to move it, but it moved independently. Someone had somehow gained remote access to my system. I had never granted remote access to anyone. I attempted various keyboard commands, but nothing worked. I observed whoever had control of my computer downloading software, most likely malware, but I was powerless to stop it. My phone chimed again, and this time the message read, "Look out your window." I was sitting near a window but wasn't sure which one the message referred to. I looked out the one closest to me and saw a man in the parking lot leaning against a dark blue van. He held a phone in his hand, and when I made eye contact, he nodded slowly. My phone alerted me to another message. Press Ctrl plus Shift plus F7 simultaneously to activate the software. I called Mikey into the room to show him what was happening. He appeared as nervous as I felt, but with the stranger just outside our window, we didn't want to provoke him. Mikey immediately called the police and informed me they would arrive soon. I didn't activate the software and simply waited. Eventually, I received another text, "I'm coming in if you don't comply immediately." I didn't understand why he or whoever was controlling my computer couldn't activate it themselves, but I dared not ask. Simultaneously, I was almost certain this program contained malware or spyware that would be extremely harmful to my system, so I refused to activate it. Mikey grabbed a baseball bat just in case the man outside attempted to enter. About 5 minutes later, we heard the doorknob turning. It was locked, but then came the sound of something repeatedly striking the door. We both held our breath as I looked out the window again. Sure enough, the man and the van were gone. The banging on the door grew increasingly violent until we heard a horrible scratching sound. It continued for a few more minutes before we heard footsteps walking down the hallway and gradually fading away. I received another text, "We will return." Those words deeply unsettled me. When the police arrived, they directed me to examine our door. I followed them into the hallway and saw my name carved into the wood. The police began investigating the entire building and brought in a cybercrime specialist to examine my laptop. He conducted scans and investigated the suspicious software on my computer. Eventually, he managed to terminate and remove it, informing me that my laptop was compromised. "The core system files have been infiltrated and corrupted," he explained. We performed a complete reset of my laptop, and he examined my phone as well. Just like before, he couldn't determine the origin of the messages and assured me they would station officers nearby in case of further incidents. The following day, I had just returned from work feeling exhausted. Mikey wasn't home yet, so I went to my room and collapsed onto the bed. I had just begun to close my eyes when I heard a rustling sound in my closet. I lifted my head but didn't hear it again, so I attempted to go back to sleep. After a few minutes, the closet door swung open. I leaped from the bed and saw a man wearing a white mask approaching me. I bolted for the door, slammed it behind me, and ran out into the parking lot. I started my car and drove away as quickly as possible. By the time the police arrived, the intruder had vanished. Surprisingly, the apartment appeared undisturbed. Nothing seemed to have been taken or damaged. That night, 2 police officers monitored everyone entering and exiting the building to catch the perpetrator. I opened my laptop and noticed my wallpaper had changed. Originally a scenic mountain landscape, it had been replaced with a disturbing image of a man wearing that same featureless white mask, holding various tools while standing in what appeared to be a small cabin in the woods. I also noticed all my applications and programs had disappeared, replaced by the same software from earlier, positioned prominently in the center of the screen. I clicked on it, discovering it had already been installed. Just like before, it filled the entire screen, displaying what appeared to be a live video stream. I couldn't exit, and the stream showed a young man's bedroom. He looked about 18 or 19 and was seated at his computer. It quickly became apparent I was viewing him through his webcam without his knowledge. A small chat box appeared in the bottom right corner of the screen, and someone typed, "Welcome to our exclusive stream. We're pleased everyone could join us. Thank you especially, Alex, for being with us tonight." My eyes widened in shock. My name is Alex, and they had been waiting for me to watch before beginning their broadcast. As I watched, the closet door behind the young man slowly opened, and a figure emerged carrying a small duffel bag. He quietly set the bag down and removed a roll of duct tape. He approached from behind, quickly covering the young man's mouth and restraining him. The victim's face registered pure terror as he attempted to scream, but the tape muffled his cries. The considerable noise suggested the young man was home alone. Content warning for the next section. I frantically tried to exit the program but couldn't. I watched in horror as the masked man retrieved a hunting knife from his bag and held it menacingly near the young man's throat. The victim trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed down his face. The attacker seemed to be waiting for something. I noticed activity in the chat box. Various users were sending messages requesting specific actions, casting votes on what should happen next. The masked figure turned toward the camera, revealing the same featureless white mask from earlier, and made a gesture as if asking for patience. He then set up a tripod with another camera, carefully positioning it to capture everything that would follow. I desperately tried every keyboard command I knew to exit, but nothing worked. In the chat box, several people were encouraging the masked man and requesting him to perform increasingly disturbing acts. The masked figure retrieved more items from his bag: rope, pliers, a small blowtorch, and various other tools I couldn't clearly identify. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized I couldn't stop what was about to happen. Then mercifully, before the torture could begin, the screen suddenly went black. When it returned, it showed only a text message: "The preview has ended. Full access requires payment. We'll be in touch about your contribution, Alex." In the chat box, I saw someone named Spectre type, "Thanks for watching, Alex. Hope to see you again very soon." The program closed automatically, leaving me with the disturbing wallpaper. I was sweating profusely, breathing heavily, and feeling violently ill throughout the entire ordeal. I hadn't noticed my phone had been receiving messages continuously. When I checked my phone, I saw hateful, accusatory messages from my friends, family, and coworkers. "You're sick and disgusting. I can't believe you'd send something so horrific. The police have been notified." I felt even more nauseated than before. These monsters had somehow sent that video stream to everyone in my contact list, making it appear as though it came from me. They had effectively destroyed my reputation in a matter of minutes. When the police arrived, I explained everything that had happened. They quickly worked to clarify the situation with my friends and family. The investigation intensified, and authorities focused substantial resources on finding those responsible. A month later, 3 individuals had been arrested. One was Spectre, another was Puppet Master, and the third was a collaborator. The site was located and shut down. I received a new laptop and phone with enhanced security features. I could end this with some horror cliché, claim I still receive mysterious texts or hear strange noises, but none of that happened. The perpetrators were arrested, and I haven't experienced any further incidents. It's reassuring to know these criminals are incarcerated or potentially facing even more severe consequences. What continues to disturb me, however, is the knowledge that all those people who were watching the streams for entertainment are still out there. And there are likely thousands of individuals like Spectre operating throughout the world. If you ever venture into the Shadow Network, ensure you take every possible security precaution. The darkest corners of the internet often reflect the darkest corners of humanity. Thank you for listening till the end. I hope you were able to relax and will now get a good rest. And don't worry, new stories are already on the way for tomorrow. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to stay connected. Now have a good night. See you in the next episode.